several that was occupied back in 1968 during an anti-Vietnam War protest on campus. But this is a live look that is happening right now. And again, you can see the photographer trying to establish that shot. But all of this is unfolding right now in real time. And again, we continue to want to give you this live look right here as we do see these protests continuing to unfold on campus, not just at Columbia University, but truly all around the United States. And I do want to bring in Karon, who is a trial attorney, but also a former Columbia law professor. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
So, Danny, I do want to ask you, as you take a look at these images right here, and again, it did kind of shift gears a little bit, but I am curious to know what your thoughts are as having been a professor at Columbia. What are your thoughts when you take a look at these live videos of the protests?
Sure. I think it's preposterous. I think these ham-fisted, knucklehead protesters who don't know how to protest with the masks and the lack of commitment to their cause, unlike in, say, Vietnam, when people actually stepped up and committed to a cause and showed themselves, here they don't. They don't have a First Amendment right even to free speech on a private university. That's what this is. This is not an extension of the government. It's a private university. That they're able to do anything is a credit to Columbia for allowing them to do it. But they don't have a right to ransack buildings, obscenity, inciting violence, all these sorts of things, even under the First Amendment, much less in a private setting where they don't even have those rights to begin with.
And again, there has been a lot of discussion when it comes to the First Amendment, freedom of expression versus safety and security. When you take a look at the protests that have been unfolding, not just at Columbia, but all across the United States, where is that line? Where does one cross the line as a protester?
Well, it can be a little bit difficult, but there's some obvious observations. Obscenity, not protected. Pornography, not protected. Incitement toward violence, not protected. Now, the student might say, oh, we're only advocating violence. That's where the line is. But you know what? What they're doing is not okay. Storming buildings, ransacking buildings, doing it so much so the kids are kicked off of campus because they feel harassed and can't take their finals and can't get their tuition dollars, the value for what they've paid. None of that's okay.
Okay, so we actually now have a new shot of Columbia University as we saw some of these protesters actually hoisting pizza boxes to the protesters who have barricaded themselves in the building. And again, this is raw and unedited as we see the photographer trying to have a better shot right there. But again, when we are taking a look at these images, what can the campus officials do with students who are barricaded inside a building? How does one handle a situation like that safely?
Well, what they can do is arrest them. What they can do is expel them. I think if the school followed through on its threat to do both, which it hasn't, it would have a real curative effect as it concerns folks' interest in protesting and would instead get them back into their dorms or apartments studying for finals, which is where they probably ought to be right now.
Yeah, and a lot of universities we've heard has now shifted to remote or hybrid learning because, again, they can't guarantee the safety of students. You know, what is your take on this, especially from a legal perspective?
Well, I can tell you, in Columbia, there have been, by my count, 4 class action lawsuits filed on behalf of students who are stuck with online learning on account of not having a safe and harassment-free learning environment. Now, there's probably a claim there because while having a harassment-free study space isn't exactly promised in students' enrollment contracts, there are Columbia policies, and a lot of them, that ensure a safe and comfortable space to study and learn. Now, whether this will be what's called certifiable as a class, meaning everybody who's studying online is entitled to a piece of whatever recovery, I'm not so sure. Because, you know, not exclusively harassed kids are the ones at home. You could have white kids, Asian American kids, Native American kids, African American kids, none of whom feel harassed, but they're taking advantage of online learning. Are they part of this class? Are they part of this group on account of having been harassed at their home? I don't think so. So we might have real ascertainability or class membership problems, as the law describes it, where it concerns just who is in these class actions that are in suit against Columbia University.
And in just the last 30 minutes or so, we were hearing from House Republicans, specifically Speaker Johnson and other GOP leaders, demanding really for the resignation of Columbia's university president regarding this. From a legal standpoint, again, it can be maybe a tricky situation. You know, what side do you take, if you will? And, you know, there's been a lot of controversy on that. When we're taking a look at this, and I do want to pop this up, okay, because this is a live look, and we want to show you this live look right here. So, Danny, bear with me because this is pretty unbelievable. So I'm going to bring a live look. Bear with me. This is raw and unedited. Okay, there we go. Take a look at this. This is happening in real time. This is UNC Chapel Hill. We are seeing a lot of law enforcement right here. And again, students who are, it appears, holding these barricades. I mean, this is happening right now at UNC Chapel Hill in North Carolina. You know, your take on this as we take a look at it live.
Well, the most ironic thing in this whole situation, whether it's UNC, Columbia, UT, USC, is that never mind what these students are doing and how faux committed they are, because half of the protests aren't even involving students. What I've learned is that the administration couldn't care less what the students think about their investments, about anything having to do with the school and its policies. The school is going to move forward.
Take a look at this, Danny. You can see law enforcement now spraying. Is this pepper spray? I don't know, but they're spraying something at this protester right here. And again, I do want to bring our viewers' attention to it because this is the issue, right? And as you pointed out, there's a difference between peaceful protests and protests then get out of hand. You also made a very important point stating that many of these protesters are not students. These are people coming from outside, inserting themselves into these protests right here. So again, you know, taking a look at this, I mean, thoughts?
Well, the schools have every right to enforce their policies. Safety, harassment-free, all those sorts of things that students have come to expect. Maybe these aren't promised in your enrollment contract, but they're almost a predicate to your being able to study by allowing you to get to class, get to the gym, get to the health center, get to the dining hall. You need a safe space in which to do that, to facilitate that kind of travel. Now, if that's not going to occur because folks are getting in the way and they're doing it in a way that's inciting and that's dangerous, that's damaging and hurting other kids, which you do not have free speech right, a First Amendment right to do. If indeed you've got First Amendment rights at all on private universities, which you don't, the school is absolutely entitled to do what's necessary to uphold its policies, and that includes calling in local law enforcement, which they're doing here. I honestly don't have a problem with anything I just saw.
Okay, thank you. And that's good to know. And we did also want to let our viewers know that we have added a viewer discretion advised because as we've seen, some of these, live situations can change in a moment and some of them can become inappropriate. Of course, if that happens, we will dip out. But we did want to make a note of that. But again, we have been seeing, and I want to share this because thank you for, hanging with us right here. I want to go back to Columbia University and I want to show this. Again, this is the tent city, the tent encampment, if you will, that students have refused to clean out and clear out, I should say. What happens if students don't move? I mean, and again, you did kind of explain, what officials can do, but short of actually physically removing them, of course, you can say, we're going to suspend you, we're going to expel you. But short of that, I mean, what can university officials do?
If you don't move, you're in trouble. Why? Because there are policies Columbia has that govern how you ought to protest, one of which is that you're done at 6 p.m., if I remember. And these folks are putting up tents. They're not done at 6 p.m. And if they don't want to play by the rules, which rules favor them, you can go out and peacefully protest. God bless. That's perfectly fine. You're going to have to deal with the consequences. And the main consequences are getting expelled, getting arrested. If you want to blow $70,000 worth of tuition over 4 years, if say you're a senior, because you want to get into a field and drink and smoke and play hacky for all for the purpose of not having the administration even listen to you, That's your choice, and you're absolutely entitled to it, but you're also going to deal with the consequences. And we all know what they are, and so too do these kids.
So, question for you: is there a difference between private universities and public universities? And if so, legally, what is the difference when it comes to how officials can handle protests?
Sure, the real difference between public and private universities concerns the application of the First Amendment, as I was mentioning. Now, with public universities, really an extension of the state, they're subject to the First Amendment, and its students or other protesters are entitled to the protections of the First Amendment and its limitations, which, like I said, pornography, not okay under the First Amendment, inciting violence, not okay under the First Amendment, and so on. As it concerns private universities, those safeguards aren't part of the process. Now, do private universities want to allow free speech? Of course they do. They're bastions of enlightenment and learning and growth. They don't want to be on the board as the place where you can't speak freely. That said, if they want to come down and crack down and expel kids and call in the police sooner than, say, a private university could, they're absolutely entitled to.
All right. Danny, anything else? Because you have a very unique perspective. And I also have a thought for you, a question for you. You know, you are a former Columbia law professor. Have you been in touch with some of your former colleagues or former students? And what is the sentiment like there on campus? Is this just a small group of people that are, you know, having a very loud voice? What is the mood there? What is the feeling there?
I've actually not been in touch with folks, but from what I understand, maybe more globally, is that these protests are a lot more visceral and more tumultuous now on account of social media because everybody wants to get on camera. Your cameras go into the protest and everyone's running up trying to, get their face on camera, jump up, wave their banner, wave their flag, do whatever. And were it not for that, I think we'd have a more measured, thoughtful approach to things. I think it's really telling, and I mentioned this earlier, that as it concerns the Israeli side and the Arab side, the Israeli-sided protest members aren't wearing masks, whereas the Palestinian-sided protesters are. That tells me, it belies their cause. It tells me that they're really not as genuine about things as they'd like the media to project, because they're hiding their faces. If you believe in something, you step up and you own it, like I'm stepping up and owning my remarks here today.
You bring up a really interesting point in that social media was not around at the time of the Vietnam War. And we have seen, and as you mentioned this, it does bring to mind the protests that we have been carrying live. You have seen protesters holding up their cell phones to record. And it's also interesting because it is recording everything that is happening, also themselves. And we have seen this in a number of areas. But you do bring up a very interesting point, because this really is, from a magnitude perspective, perhaps the first time that social media has really been put into practice such as that.
Right. And I think that's all the more reason why half of the equation is hiding its faces. I mean, the KKK did and does the same thing. If you want to draw a comparison, when you're on the wrong side of justice, that's how you present yourself. And it's not okay. Everyone wants to get on TikTok, and it's all fun and games until you get expelled. Go tell your parents how much fun and how much learning you were doing at Columbia on their tuition dollar.
Right, right. So, Danny, Karon, any last thoughts before we let you go? Again, we are taking a live look. Speaking of Columbia, this is the tent city right there again, as the photographer is trying to adjust the shot right there. But again, they have been in this encampment for almost 2 weeks now, and it does not look like they are, going to be leaving anytime soon.
But doesn't it tell you something? I mean, finals are coming up, and Columbia is a serious school. If you're screwing around in a tent city rather than studying for your econ final, I'm not sure who the heck is populating those tents. I used to walk through that mall from the subway to the law school, which is just a block to the east. And it was so serene and so tranquil. And for this to have happened, I mean, the president said she was going to kick them all out of there, and then she backed off. She's got to finish what she started, restore order, let people get back to the business of learning, of getting the value they deserve out of their tuition dollars. And let the politicians deal with this. It's not something for a bunch of uninformed kids to deal with.
And again, from a legal perspective, and I do feel like this photographer is trying to get a shot of maybe Hamilton Hall right here, but we were seeing some of the protesters actually placing food, a pizza box, into a crate and lifting it up to the protesters who are barricaded. Legally, could officials from the university call upon police to remove those students who have barricaded themselves inside that building?
Sure, they could. I don't know why they haven't. I mean, there are different ways to attack, so to speak, this problem. The police expelling kids, the class actions, which, by the way, when this dies down, which it will probably in a week or so, this case is going to be around for probably 2, 3, 4 more years, wending its way through the district courts in the southern district of New York. I don't know how it's going to resolve. We can hold a master class on class actions as they concern the education space, but this isn't the time or place. It's just, my point is just to say this case is out there, and who knows what other avenues or entry points will exist as it concerns this problem, because crazy problems spawn crazy solutions and reactions, and I don't know what the heck is next. I just hope it ends soon, because this isn't good for anybody.
All right, Danny Karon, trial attorney as well as former Columbia law professor. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We appreciate it.